My name is Elena Hartwell, and I was 26 years old the night my family gathered in my parents' library to tell me I was no longer one of them. My mother sat in the Queen Anne chair she'd inherited from her mother and told me I had embarrassed the Hartwell name beyond repair. My father stood by the fireplace with his back to me and said that a daughter who married a janitor had made her choice, and it wasn't them. My sister Victoria handed me a single envelope. Inside was a check for $25,000 and a notarized document removing me from every family trust, every emergency contact list, every future holiday photo. "This is more than you deserve," Victoria said, "for what you've done to us." I was wearing my wedding ring, 2 months married, and the man they were erasing me for was waiting in our apartment 3 miles away, probably heating up the dinner we'd made together that morning. I didn't cry, though my mother waited for it, with the particular patience of a woman who'd been planning this scene for weeks. I didn't defend myself. I didn't say a single word for almost a full minute. But here's what none of them knew. The janitor they'd spent 2 months condemning, the man they'd refused to meet, the husband my father wouldn't speak to at our courthouse wedding, wasn't who they thought he was. And 3 years from that night, they would learn exactly who Marcus Webb really was in the most public way possible. In front of 400 people, at the one place my family valued more than anywhere on earth. But I wouldn't be the one to tell them. I'd be standing next to him when they found out themselves. What happened in those 3 years, and what my family's faces looked like the moment the truth landed, is the reason I'm sitting here now, 5 years later, telling you any of this. Welcome back to Calm Stories QX, where we tell quiet, real-life stories about love, dignity, and the moment someone finally stopped apologizing for choosing themselves. If you've ever been told that who you love isn't good enough, or that your choices have embarrassed someone who should have protected you, this one is for you. Drop a comment below telling me where you're listening from, and be sure to subscribe because the part where my mother's face goes white in the middle of the Hartwell Foundation Gala is worth every second of this story. The library where they disowned me was the same room where my grandfather had once told me I was his favorite grandchild. I was 7 then, sitting in the leather chair that still smelled like his cigars, and he'd let me hold the Hartwell family Bible, the one that listed every birth and marriage going back to 1887. "You're in here," he'd said, pointing to my name in his careful script. "That means you belong." 18 years later, my mother sat in that same room and told me I'd forfeited my place in that book the moment I'd signed my name next to Marcus Webb's on a marriage license. She'd worn black to this meeting, not navy, not charcoal. Black, the color she'd worn to my grandfather's funeral. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. My father, Richard Hartwell III, had the look of a man executing a business transaction he found distasteful but necessary. He didn't meet my eyes when he spoke. He addressed the space above my head, the way you'd give instructions to a subordinate you were about to terminate. "Your mother and I have discussed this extensively," he began, and I knew from the passive voice alone that this speech had been written by the family attorney. "We've consulted with Victoria, with your Aunt Caroline, and with our financial advisors. The consensus is clear. Consensus. As if my marriage were a budget item to be voted on." Victoria sat on the sofa with her legs crossed, wearing the pearl earrings that had been promised to me before I'd committed what she kept calling social suicide. She looked at me the way you'd look at someone who'd spilled red wine on a white carpet and then refused to apologize for it. "You had every advantage," Victoria said, and her voice had that dangerous gentleness that comes right before the knife. "The best schools, the right introductions, invitations to everything that mattered. And you brought a janitor to the Wexler wedding." The Wexler wedding, that's what this was really about. 6 weeks earlier, I'd been invited to my college roommate's wedding at the Rosewood Estate, black tie, 300 guests. The kind of wedding where your +1 gets scrutinized by women in Chanel and judged by men who measure worth in portfolio performance. I'd brought Marcus. He'd worn a suit we'd found at a consignment shop for $90 and altered ourselves in our apartment. He'd made conversation with a table of venture capitalists about building maintenance and sustainability practices, not knowing, or maybe not caring, that he was supposed to be ashamed of what he did for a living. And my family's friends had seen him, had asked me about him, had mentioned to my mother at brunch the following week that they'd met my charming date and heard he worked with his hands. The phrasing had been kind. My mother's reaction had not been. "Do you have any idea?" my mother said now, in the library, with the kind of controlled fury she usually reserved for caterers who served the wrong wine. What it's like to stand in front of Barbara Wexler and explain that my daughter married the man who empties the trash bins at the university. He doesn't. I started. But my father cut me off with a raised hand. What he does is irrelevant, my father said. What matters is what people think. And what people think, Elena, is that you've chosen poverty and obscurity over everything this family represents. I looked at my father, who'd inherited his money the way other people inherit eye color, who'd never worked a job he hadn't been given by a family connection. And I thought about Marcus, who'd been at the university since 5 a.m. that morning, who studied in the break room on his lunch hour, who'd saved $17,000 in 3 years by living on almost nothing. And I thought, you have no idea who you're talking about. But I didn't say it, not yet. We're prepared to offer you a way forward, my mother said, and she gestured to the envelope Victoria had placed on the side table. $25,000. It's enough to annul the marriage quietly, resettle yourself, and begin to repair the damage. Annul. As if my marriage were a clerical error. And if I don't? I asked. My mother smiled, the smile she wore when she thought she'd already won. Then you leave this house tonight without it, she said. And you don't come back. Not for holidays, not for birthdays, not for your father's retirement gala in 3 years. You'll be removed from the family trust, the foundation board, and every legal document that bears the Hartwell name. She paused, and the pause was where the cruelty lived. You'll be no one, she said. Just another woman who married badly. The room was silent. Somewhere in the house, a clock chimed 8. Outside, I could hear the landscapers my father employed putting away their tools for the night. I thought about the apartment Marcus and I shared, the one-bedroom third-floor walk-up where we ate breakfast on the fire escape in summer and made soup on the radiator in winter. I thought about the way Marcus kissed my Deford every morning before he left for work, the way he studied his textbooks at the kitchen table while I graded papers, the way we'd built a life out of almost nothing and somehow made it feel like everything. And I looked at my mother, in her black dress, in her dead father's library, and I understood something I'd been too close to see before. She wasn't trying to save me. She was trying to save herself from the embarrassment of a daughter who'd married for love instead of status. I stood up. I picked up the envelope, and for a second, my mother's face brightened as if she thought I was accepting the terms. Instead, I opened it, took out the check, and set it on the side table. Keep your money, I said. I don't need it. My father finally looked at me. Elena, don't be foolish. I'm not, I said. I'm being clear. You're not cutting me out. I'm walking out. There's a difference. Victoria made a sound, something between a laugh and a gasp. You can't possibly think you'll survive out there on a janitor's salary. I looked at my sister, who'd never paid her own rent, never bought her own car, never done a single thing without our father's credit card smoothing the way. I already am, I said. And I walked out of that library, out of that house, and into a life my family was absolutely certain would destroy me. Here's what they didn't know. I'd been preparing to walk out for months. I need to take you back 14 months before that library, to the night I met Marcus Webb. I was 25, working as an adjunct professor in the English department at Crawford University, teaching composition to freshmen who didn't want to be there. The pay was terrible, $2,800 per course, 3 courses a semester, no benefits. But it was the job you took when you had a master's degree and were trying to prove to your family that you could build something on your own. Except I wasn't really building it on my own. I lived in an apartment my father owned. I drove a car my mother had bought me for graduation. And every Sunday I had brunch at the Hartwell house, where my mother asked intrusive questions about my dating life, and my father made observations about my little teaching project. I told myself I was independent. But the truth was, I was performing independence while still cashing the checks. It was November, and I'd stayed late in my office to finish grading a stack of essays on the Great Gatsby that were making me reconsider every life choice I'd ever made. It was past 9 when I finally left the building, and the hallways were empty except for the third-floor janitor, working his way through the trash bins with headphones in. I'd seen him before. Everyone had. He was the kind of person you notice without meaning to. Tall, quiet, with dark eyes, and this way of moving through a room like he was trying not to take up too much space. I'd never spoken to him. That night, my bag broke. Not the strap. The entire bottom of the canvas tote I'd been using for 2 years just gave up, and 40 freshman essays scattered across the tile floor like a paper explosion. I said something I probably shouldn't have said in an academic building, and I crouched down to start gathering them. And that's when I heard his voice for the first time. Here. He'd pulled out his headphones and was crouching next to me. picking up essays and stacking them neatly. He didn't ask if I needed help. He just helped. "Thank you," I said, flustered, grabbing at the papers. "I swear this bag was fine this morning." "Stress fractures," he said, and he pointed to the seam where the canvas had torn. "Happens when you carry too much weight in one spot for too long. The material just gives up." I looked at him, this janitor I'd never spoken to, giving me a structural analysis of my dead bag. "Are you an engineer?" I asked. He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that meant something different than what he was about to say. Something like that. He helped me carry the essays to my office, and when we got there, he noticed the broken drawer on my filing cabinet, the one I'd been shoving closed for 3 months. "Want me to fix that?" he asked. I should have said no. I should have thanked him and let him get back to work. Instead, I said yes. He fixed the drawer in under 5 minutes with a screwdriver from his work belt, realigned the track, and tested it 3 times to make sure it wouldn't stick. "Good as new," he said. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I know," he said. "But now you won't have to fight with it every time you need a file." There was something about the way he said it. Not like he was doing me a favor, but like he genuinely couldn't walk away from a problem he knew how to solve. "I'm Elena," I said. "Marcus." We shook hands, and his were calloused and warm, and I thought, when was the last time someone just helped me without wanting something back? I didn't see him again for 2 weeks, and then he was in my hallway again, emptying the recycling bin outside my office, and I did something I never did. I asked him if he wanted coffee. He looked at me like I just asked him to solve a calculus problem. Like, "Now," he said, "if you have time." He checked his watch, a cheap digital one with a cracked band, and nodded. "I've got 15 minutes before I need to hit the science building." We walked to the 24-hour diner 2 blocks from campus, the one that smelled like grease and optimism, and we sat in a booth with cracked vinyl seats, and I learned more about Marcus Webb in 15 minutes than I'd learned about anyone in months. He was 28. He'd been working at the university for 3 years, night shift, 5 days a week. He was enrolled part-time in the engineering program, mechanical, focusing on sustainable infrastructure. He was paying for it himself, one class at a time, because financial aid didn't cover much when you made just enough to disqualify yourself, but not enough to actually afford anything. "It'll take me 7 years to finish at this rate," he said, "but I'll finish." "Why engineering?" I asked. He stirs his coffee and I noticed he didn't add sugar, just drank it black. "Because I like fixing things," he said. "I like when something's broken and you can see exactly what's wrong and you have the tools to make it work again. It's honest work." Start with a problem, end with a solution. I thought about my job, where I spent hours grading essays that students didn't care about, where half my feedback went unread, where the problems never really got solved, just recycled into the next semester's batch of freshmen. "That sounds satisfying," I said. "It is," he said. "What about you? Why teach?" And I opened my mouth to give him the answer I gave everyone. That I loved literature, that I wanted to inspire critical thinking, that teaching was a calling. But something about the way he was looking at me, like he actually wanted the true answer, made me tell him something different. "Honestly," I said, "I don't know anymore. I thought I did when I started. But now I think I'm just doing it because it's what people expected me to do with an English degree." He nodded, like that made perfect sense. "You could do something else," he said. "Like what?" "I don't know. What do you actually like doing?" No one had asked me that in years. I sat there in that diner booth, and I thought about it. And the first thing that came to mind wasn't teaching, it was writing. The essays I used to write in college, the research I'd loved doing for my thesis, the articles I used to draft late at night when I couldn't sleep. "I used to want to write," I said. "So write," Marcus said, like it was that simple. "It doesn't pay," I said. "Neither does adjunct teaching." He wasn't wrong. We talked until his 15 minutes were up. And then he left to finish his shift. And I sat there for another 10 minutes just thinking about the fact that a janitor I'd just met had asked me better questions than my family had in years. I started looking for him after that. Not obviously. I just happened to stay late in my office more often. I just happened to take my breaks when I knew he'd be in the building. We started having coffee once a week, then twice, then every night he worked. He told me about growing up in a town 2 hours south, about his mom who'd raised him alone, about the scholarship to engineering school he'd lost when she got sick, and he'd had to drop out to take care of her, about working 3 jobs to pay off her medical debt after she died, and finally making it back to school, older and slower but determined. I told him about my family, about the pressure to marry someone from the right background, about the feeling of being decorative instead of useful. Sounds lonely, he said. It was. 3 months after that first coffee, Marcus asked me to dinner. A real dinner, not the diner. He took me to a small Italian place where the pasta was homemade and the owner knew his name. I've been saving up, Marcus said, and he meant it literally. He'd been setting aside money for 5 weeks to take me somewhere nice. My last boyfriend, the one my mother had loved, had taken me to a French restaurant and put it on his father's corporate card without blinking. Marcus had budgeted, and somehow that meant more. 6 months after that first dinner, Marcus told me he loved me in the university parking lot at 2 a.m., still wearing his work uniform, and I said it back and meant it more than I'd ever meant anything. 9 months in, he asked me to move in with him. It's not much, he said. 3rd floor, no elevator. The heat's inconsistent. But it's mine. Well, it could be ours. I'd never lived anywhere that wasn't bought by my family. I said yes. My mother cried when I told her. Not sad crying. Angry crying. You're moving in with a janitor, she said, like the word itself was profane. I'm moving in with someone who loves me, I said. Alina, be realistic. What kind of future does this man have? I thought about Marcus, studying at our kitchen table, working toward a degree he was earning with his own hands. A better one than you think, I said. 11 months in, Marcus proposed. He didn't have a ring yet. He had a plan for a ring, a budget, a timeline. But we were sitting on our fire escape watching the sunset and he just said it. Marry me. Not a question. A statement, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Okay, I said. We went to the courthouse the next week. I wore a white dress I already owned. Marcus wore the suit from the consignment shop. Our witnesses were 2 people from the clerk's office who didn't know us. And it was perfect. I called my parents that night to tell them. My father hung up. My mother called back an hour later and said, we need to talk. That talk turned into the library, the black dress, the envelope, the disownment. The first year after my family cut me off was the hardest and the best year of my life, and I know how contradictory that sounds. Hard because I'd never been actually financially independent before, and the learning curve was steep. I'd never paid my own health insurance, never filed my own taxes without an accountant, never had to choose between fixing my car and buying groceries because I couldn't afford both in the same week. Marcus and I were living on his university salary and my adjunct pay, which together added up to just under $43,000 a year. In the city we lived in, that was enough to survive if you were careful, but not enough to breathe easy. We made it work. We meal prepped on Sundays. We canceled subscriptions. We learned which grocery stores had the best sales and which nights the bakery discounted day-old bread. I started freelance writing on the side, pitching articles to online magazines that paid $50 to $150 per piece. It wasn't much, but it added up, and more importantly, it was mine. For the first time in my life, I was earning something that no one could take away because they disapproved of my choices. But here's the best part, the part that made all of it worth it. I was happy. Not the performative kind of happy I'd been at family brunches, where I smiled and said the right things and felt hollow. Actually, deeply quietly happy. Marcus and I had this rhythm. He'd leave for work at 5 a.m., and I'd wake up just enough to kiss him goodbye. I'd teach my morning classes right in the afternoons, and he'd come home around 2 p.m., sleep for a few hours, then wake up and make dinner while I graded papers. We'd eat together on the couch, watching old movies we found at the library. We'd talk about our days. He'd tell me about a broken heating system he'd figured out how to fix, and I'd tell him about a student who'd finally written something honest. And then, 3 nights a week, Marcus would go to his evening classes. He was taking 2 courses per semester now. We'd rearranged the budget to make it possible, and he was excelling. Perfect grades. The kind of student professors remembered. One night, about 8 months after the disownment, Marcus came home from class with a weird look on his face. What happened? I asked. My professor asked me to stay after, he said. I waited. He wants me to apply for a research assistant position, paid. It's with a professor who's working on sustainable energy infrastructure for underserved communities. Marcus, that's amazing. It's competitive, he said. Grad students usually get those spots. Apply anyway. He applied. He got it. The research assistantship paid $15,000 a year and came with tuition remission for up to 6 credits per semester, which meant Marcus could go full-time, which meant he could finish his degree in 2 years instead of 5. I cried when he told me. Happy crying, the kind I didn't know I was capable of until I'd married someone whose success felt like my own. We're going to be okay, Marcus said, holding me in our tiny kitchen. And I believed him. But here's the thing about my family, they didn't believe it. 6 months into the disownment, my sister Victoria texted me, "Mom's worried about you. Call her." I didn't. A month later, my Aunt Caroline reached out. "I saw you at the grocery store last week. You looked thin. Are you eating enough?" The subtext was clear. Are you starving yet? Are you ready to come crawling back? I wasn't. A year in, my mother sent a letter. It was addressed to me, not Marcus. That detail mattered. "Alina," it began, and I could hear her voice in the formal script. "Your father and I want you to know that our door is always open if you choose to correct your situation. We understand that pride can make it difficult to admit a mistake, but we're prepared to welcome you home if you're ready to make better choices." Better choices. Meaning, leave Marcus. I read the letter out loud to Marcus that night, and when I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Regret what?" "Choosing me." "Losing them." I looked at my husband, who worked 60-hour weeks and still found time to pack my lunch every morning, who quizzed me on article pitches and celebrated every byline like it was a Pulitzer, who'd built a life with me out of almost nothing, and never once made me feel like I'd sacrificed anything that mattered. "Never," I said. "Not even once. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. I missed my grandfather's library. I missed Sunday brunch, even the intrusive questions. I missed my Aunt Caroline's terrible jokes and the way my father used to rest his hand on my shoulder when he was proud of me. I missed the people I thought they were before I learned the love was conditional." The second year, something shifted. Marcus finished his degree. Not just finished. He graduated in summa cum laude, with a thesis on sustainable water infrastructure that his professors called groundbreaking. He was offered 3 jobs before he even walked across the stage. He took the one with the nonprofit, the one that paid less but mattered more. It was a position with the Urban Infrastructure Alliance, working on projects that brought clean water and energy access to underserved neighborhoods. The pay was $62,000 a year, which was more than we'd ever had. Which was, for the first time, enough. We moved out of the third floor walk up and into a 2-bedroom apartment with heat that worked and windows that didn't stick. I went full-time with my freelance writing, picked up a contract with a policy magazine, and started making a name for myself covering urban development and housing equity. And we were fine. Better than fine. But my family still didn't know, because I didn't tell them. And Marcus and I had made a decision early on. We weren't going to justify ourselves to people who'd already decided we weren't enough. "Let them think what they want," Marcus had said. "We know the truth." And the truth was, we were building something real. But then, 2.5 years after the disownment, I got a phone call from my Aunt Caroline. "Alina, it's about your father." My stomach dropped. "Is he okay?" "He's fine, healthy, but he's retiring. And your mother is planning the gala, the Hartwell Foundation Gala. The event my family had hosted every 3 years for the last 30 years. The night where the wealthiest, most influential people in the city gathered to celebrate my family's charitable work. And, let's be honest, to see and be seen. It was the event my mother had planned her entire social calendar around for as long as I could remember. "I'm telling you this," Aunt Caroline said, "because I think you should come." "I wasn't invited," I said. "You're still family, Elena. Even if your mother's too stubborn to say it." I thought about it. I thought about walking into that ballroom in a dress I could now afford, with Marcus on my arm, and watching my family's faces as they realized I hadn't fallen apart. "I'll think about it," I said. I told Marcus about it that night. "Do you want to go?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "Part of me wants them to see that we're okay, that they were wrong. And the other part? The other part doesn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me care." Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said something I didn't expect. "I got an invitation to something that night too." I looked at him. "The foundation is honoring a project I worked on, the Water Access Initiative in Riverside. They want me there to accept the recognition on behalf of the team." My heart stopped. "The Hartwell Foundation?" He nodded. "I didn't know if I should tell you. I wasn't planning to go. But if you want to." "Marcus," I said slowly, "they don't know." "Know what?" "They don't know you're you. They think you're a janitor who never amounted to anything. They have no idea you're the lead engineer on a project they're honoring." And that's when I saw it. The perfect, poetic, utterly unplanned justice of it. My family was going to honor my husband for his work, in front of 400 people, and they wouldn't know it was him until he walked onto that stage. Marcus saw my face and started laughing. "You want to go?" he said. "I really, really want to go." "Okay," he said. "Let's go." We had 4 months to prepare, and I'll admit, I spent more time thinking about that gala than I'd spent thinking about my own wedding. Not because I wanted revenge. I want to be clear about that. I didn't want to humiliate my family or make a scene. I just wanted them to see what they'd missed. To understand in the most undeniable way possible that they'd been wrong about the man married. Marcus, for his part, was less interested in the drama and more interested in the work. The recognition isn't for me, he said. It's for the team. We should go because the project matters, not because your mom's going to be there. He was right. Of course he was right. But I was still buying a new dress. I found it at a consignment shop in the Arts District, the kind of place I never would have walked into 3 years ago. It was a deep navy silk, simple and elegant, with a neckline that didn't apologize for existing. It cost $200, which was more than I'd ever spent on a single piece of clothing with my own money. And when I tried it on, I looked like someone who'd survived something and come out stronger. Marcus saw me in it and went quiet. "What?" I said. "You look like yourself," he said. I didn't know what he meant until I looked in the mirror and realized he was right. For years, I'd dressed like my mother's daughter. Conservative cuts, muted colors, the kind of clothes that whispered instead of spoke. This dress spoke. I bought it. Marcus rented a tux. We'd offered to buy one, but he insisted on renting. "I'll wear it once," he said. "No point spending money we don't need to spend." That was Marcus. Even now, even with a stable job and a savings account, he still thought like someone who'd lived on nothing and couldn't quite believe the nothing wouldn't come back. A week before the gala, I got a phone call from my mother. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Alina." Her voice was clipped, formal. "I understand you've RSVP'd for the gala." "I have." "With him?" She didn't say Marcus's name. She never had. "With my husband, yes." Silence. "I see," she said finally. "I'm calling to ask you to reconsider." "Reconsider attending?" "Reconsider bringing him. Elena, this is your father's night. The foundation has worked very hard to make this event dignified and appropriate. Bringing someone from that background will only create awkward questions." I took a slow breath. "Marcus was invited," I said, "by the foundation. For his work. I'm sure he received some sort of general invitation as a volunteer or as the lead engineer on the Riverside project." The silence on the other end of the line was so complete. Thought she'd hung up. "What?" she said finally. "Marcus is being honored. Didn't you read the program? There must be some mistake. The engineer on that project is." She paused, and I could hear her flipping through papers. "Marcus Webb." "But that can't be." "It is." Another silence. "He's a janitor." "He was a janitor," I said. 3 years ago. He's been a mechanical engineer for 18 months. The project your foundation is honoring, he designed the core water filtration system." I heard her sit down. Actually heard the chair creak. "Why didn't you tell us?" "You didn't ask," and that right there was the truth of it. In 3 years, not one of them had asked me how Marcus was doing, what he was working on, whether we were happy. They'd assumed and they'd moved on. "Alina," my mother said, and her voice had shifted into the tone she used when she was trying to rewrite history in real time. "If we'd known, you'd what? You'd have approved? You'd have welcomed him?" "We might have. Things might have been different." "No," I said. "They wouldn't have. Because you didn't disown me for marrying someone without a degree. You disowned me for embarrassing you. And the only thing that's changed is that now honoring him makes you look good. That's not fair." "It's accurate." She was quiet for a long time. "Will you at least come early?" she asked. "So we can talk before the event starts?" "No," I said. "We'll arrive when the program says to arrive. We'll sit where we're assigned. And you'll see us when everyone else does." I hung up before she could respond. Marcus looked at me from the kitchen where he'd been pretending not to listen. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. And I was. The Hartwell Foundation Gala was held at the Grandview Estate, the same venue where my parents had hosted my sister's wedding, my grandfather's memorial, and every significant family event for the last 2 decades. I'd been coming to this building since I was a child. I knew which bathroom had the best mirror, which balcony had the best view, which staff entrance the caterers used. But walking in with Marcus as a guest instead of family felt like entering a place I'd only ever seen in photographs. We arrived exactly on time. Not early, not late, Marcus had insisted. "We're not here to make a statement," he'd said while adjusting his tie in our apartment. "We're here because the work matters." I loved him for that. For the fact that even now, even knowing what this night meant to me, he was still centered on the part that was real. The project, the people it had helped, the team he'd worked with. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a small, fierce satisfaction when we walked through those doors and I saw my Aunt Caroline's face go slack with shock. She was standing near the entrance, greeting guests, and she saw me first. Her eyes went wide, then pleased. She'd always been the kindest one, and then she looked at Marcus and I watched her try to place him. She knew she'd never met him. But there was something about the way he carried himself, the way the tux fit him, the way he held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world, that didn't match the story she'd been told. "Elena," she said, and she hugged me carefully, like I was something fragile she was afraid to break. Then she turned to Marcus and extended her hand. "And you must be Marcus Webb," he said, shaking her hand, with the easy confidence of someone who'd spent the last year in rooms full of city planners and engineers. "It's good to meet you." "Webb," she repeated, and I saw the exact moment she connected the name to the program she'd been reading all week. "Oh. Oh, Aunt Caroline," I said, and I couldn't keep the smile out of my voice. "This is my husband." She looked at me, then at him, then back at me. "Your mother said." I know what she said. Aunt Caroline's face did something complicated, and then she smiled, a real smile, and leaned in close. "Good for you," she whispered. We moved into the ballroom, and I felt the room notice us. Not loudly. The Hartwell Foundation crowd was too polished for pointing or staring. But I felt the eyes, the double takes, the whispered questions behind champagne chin flutes. "That's the Hartwell daughter. The one who disappeared. Who's she with? Is that— No, it can't be." We found our assigned seats. Table 12. Not the family table, which was table 1, but not the back of the room either. A middle-distance table that said, "You're here because you matter, but you're not inner circle." Marcus pulled out my chair, and I sat, and I looked across the room to table 1, where my mother sat in a pewter gown that probably cost more than our rent. She was looking right at me. Our eyes met, and I saw her take in the dress, the hair, the fact that I didn't look defeated or desperate or any of the things she'd probably expected. Then she looked at Marcus, and I saw the confusion. Because Marcus didn't look like the man she'd imagined. He looked like someone who belonged in this room. Someone confident and calm and entirely unbothered by the wealth around him. My father was next to her, and he leaned over to say something, and my mother's mouth thinned into a line. Victoria was at the table too, sitting next to her husband Preston. And she was staring at Marcus like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't make sense. I didn't wave, I didn't smile. I just held her gaze until she looked away. "You okay?" Marcus asked quietly. "Perfect," I said. The program started 20 minutes later. There were speeches. A video montage of the Foundation's work. A tribute to my father's 30 years of leadership. He walked onto the stage in his tuxedo, silver-haired and dignified, and talked about legacy, about service, about the responsibility of privilege. It was a good speech. He'd always been good at speeches. And then he introduced the evening's recognitions. "Tonight," my father said, "we're honored to celebrate 3 projects that represent the best of what this foundation supports. Initiatives that bring resources to underserved communities, that solve problems others have ignored, and that prove what's possible when talented, dedicated people are given the support they need." He listed the projects: a literacy program on the South Side, a community health clinic in the Warehouse District, and then the Riverside Water Access Initiative, a project that brought clean, sustainable water infrastructure to a neighborhood that had been overlooked for decades. This project didn't just install pipes. It trained local residents, created jobs, and built a model that's now being replicated in 4 other cities. The screen behind him lit up with photos. The Riverside neighborhood before: cracked streets, houses with peeling paint, children playing near water that wasn't safe to drink. And after: new infrastructure, clean water, community members learning to maintain the systems themselves. "Accepting this recognition on behalf of the engineering team," my father said, from the card in his hand, "is the project's lead engineer, Marcus Webb." I felt Marcus tense beside me. "You don't have to," I whispered. "Yes, I do," he said. "The team deserves this." He stood, and I watched my father's face as Marcus walked toward the stage from table 12. I watched him try to place the man in the tuxedo moving through the ballroom. I watched him look down at the name on the card again, then back at Marcus, then at me, still sitting at table 12. And I watched the exact moment the recognition hit. His face went white, not pale, white. My mother's hand went to her throat. Victoria actually stood up, like standing would help her see better, help her understand what she was seeing. And Marcus walked onto that stage, shook my father's hand with the same calm professionalism he brought to everything, and took the microphone. Marcus stood at the podium in front of 400 people, and I'd never been more proud of anyone in my life. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look smug. He just looked like someone who'd worked hard on something that mattered and was being asked to talk about it. "Thank you," Marcus said, and his voice was steady, clear. "This recognition means a lot. Not to me specifically, but to the team this project possible, and more importantly, to the Riverside community that trusted us to do this work. He paused, and I could see him finding the words the same way he found solutions to broken systems. 3 years ago, Marcus said, I was working as a janitor at Crawford University, night shift. I emptied trash bins, cleaned floors, and fixed things that broke. I heard the intake of breath from table 1. I was also going to school part-time, trying to finish an engineering degree I'd started years earlier and to leave for family reasons. It was slow going. 1 or 2 classes a semester. I wasn't sure I'd ever finish. He looked out at the audience and I knew he wasn't looking for me, but I saw his eyes find mine anyway, just for a second. But I had support. A wife who believed I could do it even when I wasn't sure. Professors who saw something in me I didn't see in myself. A research opportunity that changed everything. He clicked to the next slide, and the screen showed the Riverside neighborhood again. This project started as a graduate research assistantship. My professor, Dr. Lin, was consulting with the city on water access issues in underserved neighborhoods, and he asked me to help with the preliminary assessments. Marcus walked the audience through the technical work, the water quality testing, the infrastructure gaps, the community meetings where residents told them what they actually needed instead of what the city assumed they needed. We didn't come in with solutions, Marcus said. We came in with questions. And the community told us what they'd been telling people for years. They needed clean water, they needed jobs, and they needed to be part of the solution, not just recipients of charity. He talked about the design process, the funding challenges, the way the team had trained 12 community members to become certified in water system maintenance. Those 12 people now have jobs, Marcus said. Good jobs, with benefits, maintaining systems that serve their own neighborhood. That's sustainability. Not just environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, social sustainability. The room was silent, the kind of silence that means people are actually listening. I'm honored that the Hartwell Foundation chose to support this work, Marcus said. But I want to be clear, this recognition belongs to the Riverside community, to Dr. Lin and the team at UIA, and to every person who believed that people deserve clean water regardless of their zip code. He paused, and then he said something I don't think he'd planned. I also want to say something about second chances, about what happens when someone sees past your job title or your current circumstances and asks, what are you capable of? What could you do if you had support? He looked directly at my father. 3 years ago, some people looked at me and saw a janitor who was wasting his time going to school. Someone who'd never amount to anything. Someone not worth knowing. My mother's face was frozen. They were wrong, Marcus said simply. Not because janitorial work isn't valuable. It is, and the people who do it keep our schools and hospitals and offices running. They were wrong because they assumed my value was fixed. That where I was at 28 was where I'd always be. He smiled, and it wasn't cruel, it was just honest. I'm grateful to everyone who didn't make that assumption, who saw potential instead of limitation, who gave me opportunities to prove what I could do. He clicked to the final slide, a photo of the Riverside community celebrating the day the new water system went live. Kids playing in the spray from a clean hydrant, parents smiling, community members in their work uniforms. That's what this project was really about, Marcus said. Seeing people, trusting them, building something together. He stepped back from the podium. Thank you. The applause started slow, then built. People stood. Not everyone. The Hartwell Foundation crowd wasn't prone to standing ovations, but enough. Table 1 did not stand. My father was sitting with his hands folded on the table, staring at nothing. My mother had her champagne flute raised to her lips, but wasn't drinking. Victoria was whispering something urgent to Preston, who looked confused. And Marcus walked off that stage, shook hands with the foundation board members waiting in the wings, and walked back to table 12. Back to me. He sat down, and I took his hand under the table, and I said the only thing I could think to say, I love you. I love you too, he said. Was that okay? That was perfect. And it was. The program continued. Another recognition, a closing speech from my mother about the foundation's future initiatives. She delivered it flawlessly, because my mother had never missed a cue in her life, but I could see the tightness around her mouth, the way her hands gripped the edge of the podium. And then the formal program ended, and the reception began, and I knew what was coming. Marcus and I stood near the bar, talking to a couple from the Urban Infrastructure Alliance, who wanted to hear more about the Riverside project. I saw my mother moving through the crowd toward us, and I felt Marcus tense beside me. Incoming, I said quietly. He didn't turn around, just squeezed my hand once. Elena, my mother's voice. Controlled but barely, I turned. Mother. She looked at Marcus, and I watched her try to reconcile the man in front of her with the image she'd built in her head 3 years ago. Mr. Webb, she said. That was quite a speech. Thank you, Marcus said. The project team did remarkable work. Yes, she said. I'm sure they did. An awkward pause. My mother was never awkward. I wonder if I might speak with my daughter privately, she said. Of course, Marcus said, because he had better manners than anyone at table 1. I'll be right over there. He stepped away, and my mother waited until he was out of earshot. You let us believe he was a janitor, she said. He was a janitor. You let us believe he'd stay a janitor. You assumed he would. I never said anything. Her jaw tightened. Alina, if we'd known, you'd have what? Welcomed him? Invited us to brunch? Let me keep my place in the family trust. We might have. This could have been different. I looked at my mother, who'd spent 3 years not asking a single question about my life, and I felt something settle in me. Not anger, just clarity. No, I said, it couldn't have, because you didn't cut me off for marrying someone without potential. You cut me off for embarrassing you, for making a choice you didn't approve of. And the only thing that's changed tonight is that now you're embarrassed for a different reason. That's not true. It is true. And you know it. My father appeared at her elbow. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller. Alina, he said. Your husband is a remarkable young man. I know. I wish things had been different. You could have made them different, I said. At any point in the last 3 years, you could have called. You could have asked how I was. You could have met him. But you didn't. My father looked at his hands. We thought you'd come back, he said quietly. Your mother was certain that once you'd struggled enough, you'd see reason. I did see reason, I said. Just not the reason you wanted. Victoria joined us then, because apparently this was a full family ambush. Alina, can we please not do this here? She hissed. I'm not doing anything, I said. I'm standing at a gala I was invited to with my husband who was honored for his work. You're the ones who made this uncomfortable. We didn't know, you didn't ask, and that was it. That was the whole thing. They hadn't asked, hadn't cared enough to wonder whether their assumptions were true, had decided who Marcus was and who I was and what our lives would be, and then had moved on. My mother tried once more. If you'd told us, would you have believed me? I asked. If I'd called you a year ago and said, Marcus is an engineer now, he's working on important projects, we're doing well, would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was lying to save face? Silence, that's what I thought. I started to walk away and my father said my name once more. Elena, I turned. I'm sorry, he said. And I believed that he meant it. I believed that he genuinely felt bad about how things had unfolded. But feeling bad wasn't the same as understanding why it had happened. And it wasn't the same as changing. Thank you, I said. But I'm not the one who needs the apology. I walked back to Marcus, who was exactly where he said he'd be, talking to a city council member about sustainable infrastructure. He saw my face and excused himself. You okay? He asked. Yeah, I said. I am. Can we go? Absolutely. We walked out of that ballroom together and I didn't look back, not once. The morning after the gala, my phone had 12 missed calls. 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, 4 from Victoria, 3 from Aunt Caroline. I listened to exactly one voicemail, my mother's. Alina, we need to talk. Please call me back. There are things we need to discuss. About the foundation, about your father's retirement, please call. I deleted it. Marcus, coffee and brought it to me in bed, which was our Saturday ritual, gala or no gala. What do you want to do? He asked. About what? About them. They're going to keep calling. I thought about it. I thought about the version of this story where I let them back in, where we all pretended the last 3 years hadn't happened, where I accepted some half apology and we moved forward with the same dynamic that had hurt me in the first place. And then I thought about the life Marcus and I had built. The apartment with the good heating, the work we both loved, the quiet, steady happiness that didn't require an audience. I don't want to let them back in, I said. Okay. Does that make me petty? No, Marcus said. It makes you smart. They didn't want you when you needed them. They want you now because having you reflects well on them. That's not family. That's strategy. He was right. I sent one text to my mother. I'm glad the gala went well. I'm not interested in rebuilding a relationship based on Marcus's accomplishments. If you ever want to apologize for the assumptions you made and the way you treated both of us, I'm willing to listen. But I'm not interested in being welcomed back because it's convenient now. She responded in under a minute. You're being unfair. We're your family, I wrote back. Marcus is my family. You're the people who gave birth to me. There's a difference. I didn't hear from her again for 6 months. In that time, Marcus got promoted. Lead engineer on a new project, multi-city water infrastructure initiative, $120,000 salary. I signed a book deal for a collection of essays on class work and dignity. The title, Janitor's Wife. We moved into a house, not a big house, but ours, with a yard and a guest room and a kitchen table big enough for Marcus to spread out his blueprints and for me to spread out my drafts. We hosted Thanksgiving. Just the two of us and Dr. Lynn and a few people from Marcus's team. It was small and warm and nothing like the Hartwell family Thanksgivings I'd grown up with, and it was perfect. 6 months after the gala, my Aunt Caroline called.